What is going on, guys? Well, last week we got the release of Saw X, the 10th film in this long-running franchise. I've already reviewed that film in full, as well as ranked all 10 Saw movies, but I enjoyed Saw X so much more than I thought I was going to, that it felt like, this is a perfect time. 10 movies, nice round number to start doing some other rankings in regards to this franchise. So we're going to talk about the Saw twists today. We're going to talk about the Saw villains tomorrow. And then in a couple of days, I'm planning on Thursday, we're going to rank every single one of the traps in this franchise in a tier list. So if you're a Saw fan, definitely stay tuned, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything that I'm about to unleash upon you this week. And being that I am going to be talking about the twist endings of all 10 of these movies, it should go without saying, but unfortunately for some people it probably won't, this is going to be a spoiler-ridden review. So if you have not already seen all 10 Saw films, if you plan on seeing them, of course, go check those movies out. About half of them I can't completely recommend to you, but it's an interesting series to check out for the good ones for sure, and then come back and check out this video. But if you don't give a damn about spoilers, or if you've already seen all 10 films, then let's get cracking. Now, how I'm going to be ranking these twists is pretty simple. It's just how effective do I think that the twists are as far as being a good ending to the movie, as well as how surprising they actually were. There's not really many twists I can think of that were blatantly obvious that I would still call a good twist, so that's probably going to be where most of the weight of my ranking sits, but there's some sorry twists as far as the execution that's still... narratively, I like what they did more than maybe some more effective twists below. So might get a little bit wild. We'll see. Coming in at number 10 for me is going to be Jigsaw. Now, Jigsaw was a movie that, there was a number of years after Saw 3D where it seemed like the franchise was done. It was wrapped up in somewhat of a neat bow. Came full circle, and we're good. We're done with the Saw franchise now. And then they decided to come back for one more, and they hired some directors that really excited me with the Spearig brothers. The trailers out there were really intriguing as far as kind of directly teasing the return of John Kramer in Jigsaw, which is certainly an element that fans have been screaming for ever since they killed him off in Saw 3. And so a lot of us showed up to see, what are they going to do? What is it going to be about this movie that merits them coming back to this franchise? And the end result is possibly one of the lamest and most disappointing things in this franchise, to where I definitely think it's the weakest ending, it's the weakest twist, it's the weakest reveal that we've had in this entire franchise, to where not only is Jigsaw not coming back, he's only in one scene, and it's because they do yet again this Saw 2 thing, which... being derivative certainly doesn't help your case in this ranking, to where the traps that we are watching, the characters that we are watching are from a game 10 years prior. And everything going on with the investigation and these forensic doctors and the lead detective who's kind of a scumbag, that's all present day stuff. So it's ultimately revealed that Logan Nelson, the lead coroner, the lead forensic investigator, is the secret apprentice of Jigsaw. And he was actually the OG, the first apprentice of Jigsaw. And he has been recreating Jigsaw's first game and dropping these bodies all in relation to this detective who is ultimately the last victim, who he wants to kill for leading to the death of his wife. So multiple things all wrapped up here. First of all, the time displacement thing we've already seen, and it was done significantly better in Saw 2. So very lame, very cheap. The fact that they teased us with Jigsaw's return just to pull that on us is kind of a fuck you. Then you have the whole secret apprentice yet again, which, half of the twists in this fucking franchise are, there's another apprentice that we never told you about. And Logan Nelson, to be fair, he hasn't been given enough to really prove himself as a character, and I don't know if they ever will return to his character, but he's the lamest of all of the apprentice characters because he just seems so shoehorned in at the end. His motivations don't seem like they line up with John Kramer's whatsoever. He puts the detective in an unwinnable trap, which is something that every single one of his apprentices, save for Gordon, has done and been a big no-no. And he's just not really an interesting character. So by the end of it, Jigsaw I don't hate as a movie. It's right in the middle of my ranking. I think the movie itself is fine, and I think it's overly hated, but that twist ending, if I was a massive fan of Saw and I was really dying for the return of John Kramer, that would have infuriated me. Coming in at number 9 for me is going to be Saw 5, one of my least favorite films in this franchise. I'm not really a fan of the Hoffman character. This one is primarily focused on the character of Strom, who is, the better detective. I don't know if I could completely call him a good guy, but he's the protagonist chasing down Hoffman the entire movie. So you have this cop cat and mouse game. So the end of the movie comes and you have Strom in his pursuit of Hoffman is led to this room that is completely empty save for this human-sized box, like this crypt, if you will, that seems to be filled with glass. There's a tape recorder and it says, hey, it's time for you to trust me. You need to get inside this box. There will be pain, but you'll at least live. And then Hoffman shows up on the outside of the room, makes just enough noise to tip off Strom. Strom cuts off the tape and then grabs Hoffman. They tussle for a second, throws Hoffman into the box, locks him in, and then the room closes itself. Listens to the rest of the tape and it says, or you will die, you'll never be found again, you're going to be framed for all of my crimes. Very convenient ending, and that's why I don't like it. Like, it's not the best ending in the world to a film that I don't really care for, so that certainly hurts it, but there is so much contrived about this ending, and they throw in this little flashback line from John Kramer where he's like, if you can predict the way the human mind works, it leaves nothing to chance. And that's like the line of dialogue that's supposed to justify how bullshit all of the little pieces falling perfectly into place in a lot of these movies are. But here, it just doesn't make sense to me, to where you have Strom, if he had listened to the entire tape, or if Hoffman didn't show up right in that perfect second, he would have gotten enough information to maybe still participate in the trap. But, the piece of information that was important is that perfect second that he makes noise to get him to cut off the tape. And then, there's so many things that could have gone wrong here. He could have just left the room and beat the shit out of Hoffman and just taken him out. He could have shot Hoffman. He comes up behind him with the fucking gun. He could have just shot him or kneecapped his ass. And, Hoffman also, if he had just closed the fucking thing and didn't put Hoffman into the trap, then they'd both be crushed. So there was just so many things about this where it's like, it had to fall into that perfect set of events for this ending to happen. And I just call it extreme amounts of bullshit on that. And then just the overall lesson to be learned by the end of it is there's no lesson. Like, this is the point from here on outward for the 5, 6, and 7 to where it just Hoffman makes up his own rules. The Jigsaw morality is gone if it was ever there. And so it's just a cop trying to do the right thing gets crushed, and the bad guy who I don't like gets away. So not very satisfying for me. Coming in at number 8 is going to be Saw 4, another movie in this franchise I'm not really a big fan of. Basically all of the Hoffman films I'm not really a big fan of, just in case you haven't seen my ranking of the films. And this one, the whole movie is testing like the C-level cop from 2 and 3 that we don't really know a whole lot about. And the whole game is about him letting people save themselves and him trying to control his urge to save people, which is a really fucking stupid thing to test somebody for. Like, again, I know we're bleeding into the Hoffman era here, but I think Jigsaw was still a part of this plan in some way, shape, or form, and that just was never a satisfying thing. It's like, okay, so he's a cop that wants to save people, so he deserves to die? What the fuck is that? Nonetheless, you get to the end to where you have these 3 people in this room, and you have Art Blank, I believe his name was, who's the guy who seems to be running the train. He seems to be the new apprentice, but we all know he's not, just an obvious red herring. You have Detective Hoffman that is sitting to a chair ready to be electrocuted, and then you have Wahlberg. You have Donnie Wahlberg's character who has still survived from Saw 2 that is sitting on top of a block of ice that is melting, and the instructions are if you breach the door to try to help them, then he's going to die. So don't fucking do it. And what does he do? The timer gets down to the bottom. He panics. He busts open the door, gets shot by Wahlberg, and Wahlberg gets his head crushed, and then seemingly Hoffman gets electrocuted, and then the lead detective character shoots Art just to find out that he's another pawn like Zepp. He has a little tape recorder, and then Hoffman stands up, and Hoffman is revealed as the new apprentice. So because I don't buy into the game itself, and I think it's bullshit, and I think the lesson being taught to this character is just stupid, and I've always just made fun of it. It's like, yeah, just don't kick open doors and you'll live. Then just the end result of just revealing another apprentice, to me, was already lame at Saw 4. Like, at that point, it's like, okay, how many people possibly bought into this guy's bullshit? Apparently a fucking lot. And it was the beginning of an era of Saw films that are my least favorite. So not a very effective ending for me. This is not my least favorite of the franchise, but to me, it is the least memorable. It's the one that I forget and have a hard time remembering specific details about the most because it's just kind of lame. Coming in at number 7 is going to be Saw 3D. Now, this one, I had a bit of a complicated time trying to figure out where to place it because on one hand, I think it's one of the most blatantly and insultingly obvious twists in this entire franchise. Maybe the most obvious. But at the same time, the repercussions, the context that is given to the narrative because of what is revealed, I think is more interesting than the movies that are below it. So essentially, you have this guy played by Sean Patrick Flanery, who is a Jigsaw survivor that is a celebrity that does book tours and does talk shows about how he survived the trap. And it's very clear that he's a fake. He made it up. He's full of shit, and he's just riding this fame off of the pain and the suffering of people who actually went through these traps. And so he is the subject of the movie. And despite the very spotty execution of this movie, and I think spotty is generous, I actually like that as a motivation to test somebody. So you have Dr. Gordon that walks in like a scene in the first 10 minutes of the film where they're doing like almost like a Jigsaw Survivors Anonymous meeting. And Dr. Gordon walks in all, stoic, and he's got a little bit more gravitas in his voice and the way that he talks, where he's like, oh, it's such a great thing that you survived that trap, didn't you? And it's so fucking obvious, not only because Cary Elwes shows up for the first time in 6 movies, that clearly that means that he's working with Jigsaw and he's going to play into the ending somehow. But even if him showing up didn't tip you off, the way that his performance is given, which is polar opposite to the wacky, over-the-top, ridiculous performance he gave in the first Saw that I'm not a fan of, that should have tipped you off. Like, I genuinely would want to have a conversation with somebody that watched Saw 3D and was shocked when the pig mask came off and it was Dr. Gordon revealed as the next secret apprentice that we didn't tell you about. I also don't like the fact that they don't set that up whatsoever. Like, these movies were churned out every single October for 8 years. Saw was so successful, this became a yearly October staple. And to me, it seems ridiculous that they didn't have enough foresight or they didn't have a deal in place for Cary Elwes early enough to plant these breadcrumbs throughout at least Saw 6, but preferably the last couple of movies. Like, have somebody almost like the Man in Black in Halloween 5, like somebody where it shows different angles doing something to set up some kind of a reveal like that. But instead, it comes across as so forced and so shoehorned and so last-minute addition that it doesn't feel natural. It feels very foreign to this franchise. However, when you get into the actual narrative context of Jigsaw finding him to be like his greatest victory or one of his greatest victories, which doesn't make complete sense to me either because he failed his test and he's been significantly less forgiving to other people that fail their tests. I mean, Adam in the same movie, his test was just to sit in this fucking bathroom, basically. He got fucked over because Amanda made him drain his key in the bathtub. And because he picked up a gun to the evil guy that's trying to kill him in this bathroom, he's doomed to just starve to death and die in this bathroom. Jigsaw's kind of an asshole. But you have the whole narrative to where Dr. Gordon was kind of his lead apprentice, and he helped them with a lot of the more medical traps like the Venus fly trap and a few things in Saw 4, and even picking the doctor in Saw 3 to be tested. And so it puts these things in context that make him a much more significant piece of the puzzle than that he deserved to be kind of explored a little bit more if they were going to do that. But I like it. I at least like the fact that there's a little more context given to some events of the first few movies that makes them a little bit better in some ways, I guess. I don't know. Like I said, it's complicated. I hate the way that they did this. At the same time, it's like, damn, that could have been cool, but you fucked it up. Not to mention, I've always found it kind of shitty that apparently his instruction was if something happens to Jill, then take out Hoffman, then you can seize control over everything. You'd think Jigsaw would be like, yeah, Hoffman's probably going to try to kill my ex-wife, so don't let that happen. Coming in at number 6 is going to be Spiral from the Book of Saw. I don't know why they gave it that subtitle. It's kind of stupid. But nonetheless, you have here the next attempt to reboot this franchise from a couple of years ago. A story that was kind of molded to fit Chris Rock's pitches in there and make him the lead of this movie. And it goes back to the kind of Seven-style detective story of the first film. And I like Spiral quite a bit. That is one of my favorites of the franchise. I really wish that we could get a follow-up on it, to be honest, even though Saw X is definitely the direction to go. So Spiral essentially becomes a Jigsaw game where a lot of corrupt police officers are being tested throughout this movie. And the end reveal is that the rookie partner that has been tethered to Chris Rock throughout most of the movie, Detective Shank, is actually the killer this time. And he is punishing all of these cops because he was a little boy that saw his father gunned down in cold blood to protect Samuel L. Jackson, who is Chris Rock's father. And Chris Rock was the one who protected him, told him, shh, don't do anything, like stay in the closet. And so there's this whole scenario going on to where he reveals himself to Chris Rock. He reveals why he is doing this. And even though it never really feels like he's 100% genuine, he kind of tries to get Chris Rock to join him as like a partner, and they can continue doing this across the entire system and just flip the system on its head. And while he is definitely putting a lot of these cops to the test, he ends up with the cop that killed his father and puts him in a trap to where it's unsurvivable unless Chris Rock comes in and intervenes. And he's too late when he does intervene. The guy ends up dying. And in a way, that was kind of like Chris Rock's test of, are you actually going to save this corrupt piece of shit murderer, or are you going to be completely on board for my mission? And I guess at that point, he realizes that Chris Rock and him just aren't going to be boys. And so it's kind of a dual twist. You have the reveal of the killer, and then you have the reveal that Samuel L. Jackson, Chris Rock's father, was kept alive, and he is strung up into this marionette trap to where he is going to be gunned down by a bunch of other cops inadvertently while Chris Rock watches. And there's some things about this that is so cool as an ending, and the way that it's shot, and the way that it's executed, and the way that it's visualized, but this competes with Jigsaw for the most obvious twist reveal of the franchise, because there's a point in the movie about 45 minutes in to where Detective Shank's character is believed to be dead. He is believed to be the latest victim of this killer's rampage, and he was skinned alive. So they go to this crime scene. They see this body that has no skin left on it except for the tattoo of Detective Shank's supposed son, which tips off Chris Rock that that's who it was. But unfortunately, as with all Saw movies, and as with Spiral throughout the first 45 minutes, whenever there is a body or a remains of a person that is given to the audience and the lead detectives, we get a flashback, or we get some kind of a visual showing them going through this trap and what happened and why they lost and got killed. And they don't do that with this one. They just show a couple of flashes of skin being peeled off, and that's all they give us. And that was such a tip-off that this was bullshit. And so from that moment, it's like, oh, so it's him. Like, that couldn't have been more obvious, guys. How the fuck did you screw that up? And so that's honestly the biggest negative that I have with Spiral, is that's such an obvious reveal that it really kind of takes down the really good execution of everything else that they do in that movie, in my opinion. But it's here halfway up because I at least really like Detective Shank's motivations. I like how he kind of toys with Chris Rock in the third act, and there's some questions of whether or not he was actually planning on teaming up with him, or if he failed his test and now he's just manipulating him further. I think the way that they take out Samuel Jackson was pretty badass, and it leaves it at a point to where it ends so quickly and suddenly with the elevator shutting and him doing this and Chris Rock screaming, that it leaves it to where I want to follow up. I want to see more with these two characters. I want to see Shank taking on more corrupt police officers and a breadcrumb trail being left for Chris Rock's character to follow him, and more cat and mouse stuff. I want that. I might be the only person on earth that wants it, but I want it. Coming in at number 5 is going to be Saw X. And this is another one that was kind of complicated, because for as many things that I really loved about Saw X, it doesn't have the strongest ending, I'll be honest with you. And it's because they already have plans in place to follow this movie up and carry this story forward and carry these surviving characters forward. And I think once we get the next movie or the next two movies, however many they're planning on making to close out this section of the story. I think it's going to make the ending of this one better, but as is, it's a little anticlimactic. So essentially you have this scenario to where all of these doctors or all of these con artists scammed some money out of Jigsaw, making him think they were doing this experimental surgery to cure his cancer, and they didn't do shit to him. They just took his money and ran, and so he locks all of them into this room with these different traps and tests them, and one by one, they all lose in very, very vicious ways, very gory ways. And you have the ringleader of all this, Cecilia Peterson, who is clearly the most evil of all of them. She's the ringleader. She's the one that has all the nefarious motivations. The other ones are all just like drug addicts or poor people that, you know, they definitely fucked up, but they're not as evil. You know, they're not as incapable of improving and learning as Cecilia is. And so you have this trap to where, you know, Cecilia, as well as, what the fuck was the dude's name? Parker, who is revealed as like her lover, comes in, and they get the drop on Amanda and Jigsaw, and they force Jigsaw into this trap with this little kid that's essentially like a teeter-totter, where they're getting waterboarded with blood, whoever pulls the lever. And it's a great scene to where Jigsaw keeps saying, no holla, no holla. He's trying to save this kid, and the kid got a lot of heart trying to save Jigsaw. Really cool. Again, the movie succeeds at making Jigsaw a hero. I don't know how the fuck they did it. And so you are led to believe that that is the trap meant for Cecilia and Parker, and had things not gone shit, they probably would have been their trap. So they leave Jigsaw to be killed in this trap, and they go into this room to get the money that he took from them, that they took from him. And the doors close, and this gas starts to come in, and you get this, you know, voiceover and the Hello Zep music, to where basically Jigsaw knew one way or another he was going to get both of them in a trap to where they had to fight each other for survival. And so you have the one trap where it's like somebody has to take the burden of away from somebody else, and then you have the opposite of the one that they're actually in now, which is one of you has to kill the other because only one of you can survive. There's a little hole that they can stick their head through and not die with this gas that's corrosive. And there's a part of that I like, that he had an ace in the hole. There's a part of it that I like to where it definitively shows that Cecilia doesn't give a fuck about anybody, as if that wasn't really already clearly established, but at least shows to Parker, like, yeah, you know, you might have been fucking her, dude, but she didn't care about you, and you were the last person that had to go for her to survive, so bye-bye. But the unsatisfying part of it is that without the context of how they're going to follow these up, it feels like Jigsaw let off a seriously evil woman pretty easily. And it leaves it anticlimactic to where all these other people that were significantly less evil than her just got mutilated, and she, you know, survived some gas. Didn't really get punished or taught really much of anything. But I also think that's an integral piece to where they're going to be taking the relationship of Jigsaw and Amanda. So again, this can go up or go down depending on how they follow up this movie. As is, it sits right here in the middle, to where I kind of like that we finally got a spot where Jigsaw's plan didn't go 100% per plan, and he kind of had to improvise a little bit, and he was tested himself and ended up being a bit of a bad motherfucker. But the ultimate trap, the ultimate twist of how he was going to punish Cecilia, kind of weak. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Saw 6, another movie that I don't particularly care for the movie so much, but the ending definitely hits with a bit of a punch. You know, it does leave you in a spot where you're like, oh shit, okay, how are they going to follow this? So the first part of the twist that we're given is when you're following the central game and the character that is being tested, you're led to believe that the final trap is going to involve his family. They kind of tease that throughout the movie, and it turns out it's actually the family of somebody that he wronged, somebody that died because he denied coverage. So there's the first little switcheroo that's pulled on you. And then you get to Hoffman. So essentially, again, Hoffman on the run. This is the movie where everything is seriously closing in on him, to where he just kills a whole room full of cops. And it's basically common knowledge at this point that he is Jigsaw. He is the new killer. And so he's on the run trying to survive. And the twist of the movie is essentially where you have Jill Tuck, who is the ex-wife of Jigsaw, who throughout the previous movies and this one, there's flashbacks that show that she wasn't really on board with Jigsaw's game and his morality and this new kind of psychotic thing that he's, the psychotic lease on life that he has. But she was given this box in Saw 5. And in Saw 6, they reveal it to be a new version of the reverse bear trap. So the twist ending of this movie is that you have Jill that gets the drop on Hoffman through the instructions of Jigsaw, where he knew Hoffman was going to eventually go psycho and not follow the rules. And she locks him into this room, locks him into this chair, and sticks this brand new reverse bear trap on him. And the second part of the ending is that the climax is that Hoffman is able to break himself out of this, stick the trap into the grates of this door to where it won't fully open, and then he literally rips his mouth wide open like a Glasgow smile to get his face out of it. And it's fucking intense. The way that it leaves with the visual of him like screaming upwards while his mouth is ripped all the way open is a really gnarly visual. I don't like the fact that Hoffman lives again. Again, I don't care for the character. I thought that was just, it didn't leave the best taste in my mouth in Saw 5. There is a bit of a bitter pill to swallow that it happens yet again in Saw 6, but at least it was a lot more intense and it was a lot more wild. And so while I wouldn't classify this as a twist that's necessarily surprising and shocks you, we haven't gotten to those yet. This is at least one to where it leaves the movie off at a point to where I'm like, okay, all right. How are you going to bring this home in Saw 3D? Coming in at number 3 is going to be Saw 3. And this is a movie to where you have Jigsaw, who is at the end of his rope. He's on a hospital bed the entire movie. You got Amanda right there with him. There is a doctor that they have set up into this like shotgun shell collar, and they're forcing this doctor to do procedures on Jigsaw to keep him alive. And all the while they have this guy, Jeff, the slow motherfucker Jeff, that is going through these different rooms, and he's essentially vengeful because his son was killed in a DUI, I believe. And every room is somebody that wronged him or somebody that had something to do with his son's killer getting off. And then you have basically he's being tested of if he can forgive people. And I think it's one of the better games, one of the better lessons of the franchise, despite the character being taught not being the most interesting. And so eventually you get to the end. He's gone through all the victims. He eventually finds forgiveness for his son's killer, but he's too late. And then he finds himself into the room where Jigsaw and Amanda and this doctor are. And there's a dual twist in this movie. The first twist is that the doctor that has been locked into this trap and forced to perform all these surgeries and this care for Jigsaw is actually Jeff's wife, and it's the final piece of his test. You also have this other angle that is kind of the more memorable angle to where the entire scenario with this doctor has actually been a test for Amanda, to where her traps have now become unwinnable. She is actually murdering people. She's not giving them a chance to learn their lesson and have this new lease on life with a few less limbs. And Jigsaw finds this out and tests Amanda to see whether or not she is actually suitable of carrying on his legacy or not. And at the time, that was a really cool twist because, Saw 2, we had just been revealed that Amanda was a apprentice. Now, the very next movie, now she's not maybe the perfect apprentice that we thought she was. And so I think that those two twists paired together make for a pretty strong ending, especially the fact that it all goes to shit in many different ways. And they try to add some context to that in like Saw 5 or 6 to where Hoffman actually manipulated Amanda. I hate that side of it. But nonetheless, at the time that we watched Saw 3, I thought that was a really cool ending, and that was still at a point where this franchise was able to surprise me. After this, after Tobin Bell was out of it, and the twists got significantly less interesting, and the execution was a good bit worse, then it just kind of felt like a gimmick that the Saw franchise had to keep going, kind of like M. Night Shyamalan. There's always got to be a twist there for the most part. But these top 3, starting with Saw 3, are the ones that definitely leave you with an impact. And now we're at the top 2, and I would probably bet money this is most people's top 2, and there's a lot of debate on which one is number 1, which one impacted you the most, which one's the more iconic twist. For me personally, number 2 is going to be the original Saw, to where Jigsaw was inside the bathroom the entire time. The dead guy, the seemingly dead body in the middle of the room, that is John Kramer. And I guess you could say the reveal of the identity of John Kramer as Jigsaw and not Zepp, as if anybody believed it was Zepp, is part of the twist as well. All of that. So, of course, the plot of Saw, you have these 2 men that wake up in this really nasty-ass bathroom. They're chained to a pipe, and there's a lot of different things involved with their game. There's different people involved with it, and the whole movie is kind of setting up the the legacy of Jigsaw, the mystery of Jigsaw, and there's a bit of a detective flavor in here with Danny Glover and his partner, at least the part of the movie where they're trying to figure out the identity of Jigsaw and stop the killings. And there's all these different reveals of why these two guys are in their room and why they're a part of this test and why they're linked together and all that. That, you know, there's significant reveals throughout the movie. It's a really neat concept. And then you get to the very end of the film to where Dr. Gordon loses his shit, cuts his leg off, seemingly shoots Adam, and then Zepp comes in, gets his fucking head caved in by Adam, who was not killed, just wounded in the shoulder, and then Gordon crawls his ass out of the bathroom and leaves Adam there. And he's feeling around on Zepp, who at that point they think is the Jigsaw killer, and he finds this tape. Plays it, finds out that Zepp is actually just another pawn, and the Jigsaw killer is still out there, and then obscured in the background, you see this blurry image of this man standing up who has been dead in the middle of this room the entire time. And it is one of those twists that has left an impact. It's one of those twists that is probably going to be cemented as one of the most iconic twist endings of all time. To the point where I feel like the shock value of that twist and people's memory of how surprised and shocked they were when he stood up and just how much of an impact it left in that last 2 minutes of like, holy shit, that was crazy. I feel like that has also put a bit of rose-tinted glasses on people for the actual quality of Saw. And I don't feel like it's aged so well, but people really love that movie and still hold it in very high regard. And more times than not, they use the twist as the justification for that. So for me, yeah, I was shocked when I first saw it. I thought it was awesome. I couldn't wait to show my parents. My parents were really surprised by it. But it's not my favorite Saw film, so that certainly adds into it a little bit. And I do think that there is a twist in this franchise that surprised me even more and has actually aged a little better as well.
Game over.
So coming in at number 1, of course, process of elimination is Saw 2. And Saw 2, before the release of Saw X, was my favorite of this franchise for years. To me, that was always the one that just got it right, that did everything the best and brought everything home in full circle in the most perfect way. So you have this game to where there's like 7 or 8 strangers that all have different reasons to be in this room that are stuck in this house of traps with the son of Donnie Wahlberg's character, who is this somewhat corrupt detective that is the one being tested. And so he's in this room with Jigsaw with a bunch of monitors showing all the different angles of this house, all the different people and criminals and murderers in there, and all the different traps that they are going through. And the game is that Jigsaw tells him, if you sit here and you talk to me for an hour or so, however long, if you sit here and you don't move, your son will be delivered to you safe and sound. And of course, it gets down to the wire. It gets down to the point where his son is being chased by the big, bulky motherfucker, and he loses his shit, starts beating the fuck out of Jigsaw. Jigsaw tells him, I'll take you to where your son is, and lures him away. And there is another double twist, a twist that's twofold, just like with Saw 3, to where you have this reveal after Wahlberg and Jigsaw are out of the room and the timer hits 0, this safe opens up in the room, and his son is in there with an oxygen mask, safe and sound. And then it's revealed by that all of the footage that they have been watching is just a recording. It's not a live feed, and it was from days previous. The game is already done. Everybody's fates are already sealed, and his son is alive. If he had just sat there, it would have been fine. Then they follow that up with the ultimate twist that Amanda, who was a part of this game, one of the people seemingly being tested again by Jigsaw, is actually his first apprentice, at least in the timeline that we're being shown, his first apprentice. And so she was in this game to keep his son alive. She helped Jigsaw with, I believe, setting up the bathroom. So there's this ultimate reveal that Jigsaw has help now. So even though he's a dying man, that cancer's eating away at him, the games will go on. And I just thought both of those were executed so perfectly to where I did not see it coming whatsoever, that it was in a different time and that was going to end up being the reveal with his son. I was right there too, like, oh shit, is he going to live? Like, Jigsaw, what'd you do? And I also was able to be really surprised by Amanda being his apprentice. Like, I bought in fully that she was in there being tested again, especially after she got thrown into the needle pit, which is probably the most iconic section of this movie. So to me, this is the twist that caught me the most off guard, This is the twist that I think comes together the best. This is the twist that caps off what is still my second favorite of the franchise, but for most of my life has been my favorite of the franchise. There's very few things that I have negative to say about Saw 2. So to me, the overall experience of that movie capped off with two very well executed twists that still stick in my mind a little bit more than the dead body getting up in the first one. To me, that leaves it to be my favorite twist of the Saw franchise. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2023 new release reviews. I am also going to put my ranking of all the Saw films up here. And like I said, hit that subscribe button and like and share this video so that you are prepared for tomorrow when we talk about all of the villains of the Saw franchise. And then in a couple of days, we'll talk about the traps. So thank you guys for watching as always. And remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.